And good morning, and thanks for joining us here on 12 News Today in AZ. I'm Justin Pizzera. Great to be with you on your Friday. So we have been talking about this for really all morning, talking about Governor Katie Hobbs joining us to talk about some of the issues that are facing the state. She's joining us live here and live in the studio. Thank you for joining us. A lot going on. How's it going, I have to say, first off?
Well, it's been a busy year so far. Great things happening in Arizona.
So we want to talk about some things that have been in the headlines. So we're going to touch on a lot. The DDD, Turquoise Alert. We'll talk about the Dbacks. We just got a whole host of things to talk about. So we'll start with the DDD, the Division of Developmental Disabilities. There's been this whole issue to get folks caught up on this. There was a $122 million deficit. It's a program that thousands of families rely on here in Arizona. Was it like 60,000 families? It's a lot. But then there was that $122 million deficit. The Republicans came out with their proposal. There were some significant cuts that basically were going to impact children. And then you stepped in. So where does it stand right now with this whole funding for the program?
Yeah, so first let me say this, the funding, the $122 million was the original budget is based on projections, and the actual spending was more than the projection. These supplemental kind of requests are a routine part of budgeting. And the majority in the legislature decide to make this a crisis and attack these families to score political points. The families were not daunted, and they kept showing up, and they made their voices heard. They made people understand how critical this funding is for the services their families rely on. This allows them to take care of kids with really serious disabilities at home in the best environment possible for them. And we got this funding passed. And so now these families have certainty. The services are going to continue. And we've been able to ensure that the legislature, they'll always try to politicize things, but they have less ability to try to undo this kind of program in the future.
And so one of the issues was that the funding, or I should say that the families, they would maybe have to get care somewhere else. Right now they can take care of their kids at home, but with these funding cuts, basically they would have to go somewhere else. The burden would fall on the family, right?
Right, and the thing is that many families did have caregivers, and caregivers have been leaving this field for a while, but it was very exacerbated during COVID. And so that's when this Parents as Paid Caregiver program was first allowed. But if the parents weren't the ones providing the care, the caregivers just aren't there. We need the workforce, and so that's one of the biggest issues here.
So that $122 million, one of the things that Republicans criticized you about is they didn't know it. They say they didn't know that there was such a deficit. How did they not know? Were they not told?
It was in our budget request that we put out in January, which is routine. We always do that. But supplemental requests, as I mentioned, are routine. Caseloads sometimes exceed projections, or spending on those caseloads exceeds projections. Under the Ducey administration for 8 years, there was over $3 billion in supplemental requests approved, and no one made this kind of crisis over it as they chose to do for this particular issue.
So you brought up some of the families. They were very upset over this. You said that they just kept showing up. Now that there's this effort to basically recall 4 Republican lawmakers who they believe really spearheaded this and really was daunting them, are you for this recall on those?
Yeah,
those elected
I'm
officials?
not involved in that at all. So this is one of the ways they chose to make their voices heard, and this is the tool they chose to use.
I do want to talk first, lastly, on this. What does the people who are involved in this, these parents, what do they need to know as far as the funding?
Well, for now it's in place, and we're heading into the process of negotiating the next year's budget, and I'm going to continue to fight for this funding because we know how important it is for these families. And the fact that they kept showing up, that really made all the difference in this whole fight. I had a chance to meet with several of them. It was heart-wrenching hearing their stories and the situations they would be placed in if this funding hadn't been approved.
I do want to talk about the budget. Your office just came out with a statement yesterday criticizing the Republicans for going on vacation, is what you believe. What's the status of the budget? Because you said that they're still kind of just keeping their cards close. You don't know what their agenda is on this.
Yeah. Republicans in the legislature need to show Arizonans what their budget priorities are. And we can't move forward on a budget until that happens. I released my budget in January.
Okay. One thing that the legislature did agree on was the Turquoise Alert.
Yes.
This whole Emily Pikes law, it passed with bipartisan support here. This is in direct response to Emily Pike, the young girl who went missing. That's pictures of her right there. She went missing from a group home in Mesa. Her body was found dismembered along the US 60 near Globe weeks after she went missing. And one of the things, there was never an alert for this young girl. So they unanimously passed this Turquoise Alert. It's going to be headed to your desk for you to sign it.
Yeah.
You're going to sign it.
Absolutely. So first, Emily Pike's tragic murder just really reminds us of the crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous people. And this Turquoise Alert was first contemplated and requested by the first Missing and Murdered Indigenous Persons Study Committee in Arizona back in 2019. And so this last year, I directed DPS, Department of Public Safety, and DEMA to implement this code. And what this law will do is now codify this. And so that ensures that it will have long-term support and be able to stay in place. This code will provide a critical resource for this gap where people don't meet the eligibility for a silver alert or an amber alert. And so it's going to be a really important tool for addressing the missing and murdered Indigenous person crisis.
And you said DPS, you want that done by this summer, is that right?
They're on track to get it implemented by this summer, yes.
And so yesterday, there were 93 cases here in Arizona of missing Indigenous people. We also had the highest number of unsolved missing Indigenous cases in the country here in Arizona. So how do you get that number down?
Yeah, that's one of the things that our MMIP task force is trying to address, and I think these cases are really complicated and they cross so many jurisdictions, and I think that's one of the different law enforcement jurisdictions, and I think that's one of the biggest barriers. And the task force is continuing to look at that and come up with recommendations so that we can make that number lower, and this MEP alert code will be really helpful with that.
Okay, I want to talk about Axon. That has been in the news a lot lately. Just to get folks caught up, Axon is the maker of tasers, body cameras that police officers use, and their headquarters have been in North Scottsdale for years. And so now back in April, you signed a bill that eased zoning restrictions around their corporate headquarters. They want to build this new corporate headquarters. This bill, very critical for some folks. They say that it was specifically for Axon to build its new headquarters. Just so you know, these headquarters, they want it to be 1,900 apartments, restaurants, hotels. The city council approved it, but then you had folks who came forward, they didn't like it. They wanted to put this to a public vote. They got enough signatures, but then you signed this bill and that basically takes away that public vote. So they've been very, very critical of you. Why not just let that public vote play out like they wanted?
Couple things. First of all, you mentioned that Axon has had their headquarters in Scottsdale for years. Not only that, this is a company that was born in a garage in Scottsdale. It's an Arizona company that creates thousands of jobs a year. And without this bill, they would be moving those jobs to Texas or Florida. And not only moving those jobs, but uprooting families who love their jobs at Axon and would have to either leave Axon or leave the state that they love. And now they don't have to do that. So this was not about the voters at all. This was about special interests and politicians who were using government to try to drive a company out of Arizona. And now that's not going to happen.
So Scottsdale, the city council just approved this week to pay 6 figures for an outside council to come basically to see what they're going to do, challenge the state, challenge Axon, all the parties in this. I want to read you a quote, though, from somebody, one of the residents. They said that this tramples on the rights of Scottsdale citizens to decide their own future by you signing this. So what do you say to those folks who believe that by signing that bill, you basically took away their rights?
Look, the city council unanimously approved this zoning. This is a industrial area.
But they also didn't want you to sign the bill as well.
Well, it was a different city council, and they were using all kind of political maneuvers to drive this company out of the state. They kicked this to the ballot in November of 26. If they had just had an election sooner, it would have been resolved. And they were just playing all kinds of shenanigans. And so not only is this a company in Arizona that's creating jobs, the residential portion of the campus that they want to build is addressing a huge need that we have with workforce housing. So they're actually trying to help tackle this problem. This is an industrial zoned area, and I cannot fathom how having housing in that area is going to be a problem for residents of Scottsdale.
And so that's why you stepped in on this.
Yeah.
Okay, so just so you know, Axon has said that basically Florida, Texas, those are basically states that we're trying to attract them to come there.
Yeah.
And so you believe that this move would keep Axon here?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So let's talk about keeping sports here.
Yeah.
In Arizona, specifically the Dbacks. I don't know if you saw this yesterday. The Utah Hockey Club came out with their new Utah Mammoth, which was basically the Arizona Coyotes. So there was a ton of negotiation trying to get the Dbacks to stay here, or the Coyotes to stay here. Now we have the Dbacks here. We have this whole negotiation over Chase Field. Your office has stepped in to try to broker a deal between, you got the Dbacks, you got the county, you got the city. Where does that stand right now, trying to get a deal with the Dbacks?
So negotiations are moving forward. There was another meeting between the stakeholders yesterday, the county, the city, the Dbacks, and our office. And I feel like they're moving in a positive direction. Don't want to get into the details there, but I think we're all focused on keeping the Diamondbacks here and keeping them in downtown Phoenix. Not having them play at Chase Field would cost jobs, and it would hurt Arizonans. And I want to make sure we get a bill that keeps them here, that continues to create jobs and protects the taxpayers. Any solution we look at will include penalties if the Diamondbacks leave at any time during this period. So we want to make sure that we're protecting taxpayers in whatever the end result is.
I know the mayor, I should say, the mayor of Phoenix, Kate Gallego, sent a 4-page letter to you outlining her concerns. Have you talked to the mayor? Are you guys addressing those concerns?
She's been a part of the meeting. She was there yesterday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk tariffs, because that obviously has been in the news a lot of back and forth. How do you see these tariffs that keep being implemented, taken back? How is this impacting Arizona's economy?
You know, I have gone across the state and talked to local businesses, farmers, big businesses. Everyone's concerned about them, and even the uncertainty. I talked to produce distributors who said they were raising costs before they knew if there were going to be tariffs, because just in anticipation. So, and that's raising prices for Arizonans. And, you know, JP Morgan has said this is the largest tax increase on Americans in decades. He's not wrong. And when the president talks about, well, maybe kids will have to do with fewer toys, that is not what this is about. This is families that are already struggling with high costs, trying to buy basic things like diapers and school supplies, put food on the table. That's who this is impacting.
Let's talk tariffs and specifically semiconductors. Initially, President Trump said semiconductors, they would be exempt from tariffs. Then in April, he said that there was going to be a probe on whether to pursue tariffs on specific semiconductors. He's citing national security. What are your thoughts on producing these semiconductors here locally, or at least in the United States, for security reasons?
Well, I'm really glad that we've been strategic about building the semiconductor industry here in Arizona, starting with Intel's long presence here, but they're obviously expanding, and then with TSMC's huge investment. And so we are right now in Arizona producing the most advanced chips made in America. That's good for our economy. It's good for national security. But this is not something that can happen overnight. And we have to be really strategic about how we're bringing this manufacturing back. We're doing that. And so using tariffs as an incentive to do that when we're already doing it doesn't make sense.
So the CEO of TSMC, who's, I mean, they're investing billions of dollars here in Arizona, like the largest investment in U.S. history from like a foreign company. So he said that the uncertainties and risks for the potential impacts of tariff policies, that they're there. So he's acknowledging it. Are you concerned at all?
No, I'm absolutely concerned. I know that TSMC is committed here. They wouldn't have made that recent investment of an additional $100 billion if they weren't. But the work to bring the supply chain over is continuing, and it's not, again, something that happens overnight. And so the whole process of chip making involves a lot of different places, stops along the supply chain, and that supply chain is not entirely here. And so relying on equipment, on parts, on chemicals that might not be made here. So it's a process.
How do you attract businesses, though, just on a wider level, when you have these tariffs? I know that the city of Phoenix, they actually went to Taiwan
Yep.
to try to get these businesses here.
Yep.
You've traveled
Yep.
To the other countries to try to get these businesses to come to Arizona. When you have that kind of a climate, though, how do you then attract these businesses to come here?
Well, and that's a really good question. I mean, we've had great economic growth here. We're not slowing down. We're continuing to showcase Arizona as a place to start or grow or move your business, and we're still getting tremendous response. But what the president is doing on tariffs is creating uncertainty across the economy and across the globe, and we're overcoming that, but it's a challenging time right now.
Have you heard of any businesses just kind of hesitant now? Maybe they were thinking about coming to Arizona and they're like, I don't know.
I don't know that it's so much about moving to Arizona as it is just uncertainty about future growth, expanding right now in this climate, or making new hires right now in this climate. And that's, again, it goes back to the tariffs and the uncertainty.
Okay, last question. It's Mother's Day this weekend.
Yeah.
What are your plans? Are you ready? And are you ready for the triple digits?
No, I'm not ready for triple digits, but having brunch with my mom and then spending the afternoon with my kids.
What's a good brunch spot for you guys? Not where you're going this one, but what's your favorite?
Oh, my favorite is Oso on Indian School.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, right there in Arcadia.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So Governor Hobbs, thank you so much for joining us, covering all things.